After installing your Hyper-V role, it's a good idea to make sure your setup is as secure as possible prior to putting any virtual machines into production. This is why Microsoft has created a best practices analyzer for every single role that is included in your operating system. Now we're in Server Manager and we can see the various different roles that are installed. We see DHCP, File and Storage, and Hyper-V. This is on one of our virtual machine hosts. So if we click on Hyper-V, then we can see VM host 1 at the top with the IP information. Let's go ahead and scroll down. We can see events. We can see services that are running with Hyper-V, and now we see our best practices analyzer. Let's go ahead and choose tasks and start the BPA scan. This is what Microsoft says about best practices. In Windows management, best practices are guidelines that are considered the ideal way under typical circumstances to configure a server as defined by experts. That means that we can be as secure as possible by following either most or all of the best practices that are going to be recommended. Now, in some cases, as we'll see in a minute, not all these best practices make practical sense for every environment. Let's go ahead and choose to start the scan. And when it's done, we'll see what the experts recommend to make changes to our Windows Server 2016 Hyper-V environment. The scanner is done after a few seconds, and now we can take a look. So we see things broken up by severity. We see warnings, and we see informational, and then we may also see errors if there's anything really bad that we may need to change. So let's take a look at the error first. And the error here says one or more virtual machines have not been backed up in the past week. And that's a really good suggestion that we should be backing up our virtual machines. Let's scroll to the top and go to where our warnings are. And the first warning says that Hyper-V should be the only enabled role. Now, this is a recommendation, but in many cases, it's just not practical. So I may need to use the server for more than one role, such as DHCP and File and Storage, as you see there. It doesn't mean that things are not going to work. It just means that they may not work as well or as secure. So what we can do is we can click on the more information about this best practice to learn if it's going to be a security issue we can live with or one that we should change. Let's go ahead and click on the next warning, and we see all networks for live migration traffic should have a link speed of at least 1 gigabit per second. So this is a good idea as well, that you should have at least 1 gigabit. Otherwise, you may notice that there are some issues. So we can see that live migration may be impacted, may run more slowly if they're not all set to 1 gigabit. So it just says here that we need to verify that information. And we can do that simply by going to our network cards and checking the speed. So we can go through all these different warnings until we get through and decide what we're going to do. Once we fix a lot of these issues, we run the scanner a second time, and you'll see a lot of these issues go away. Once they're gone, or to a point where we can live with them, then we can go ahead and start putting our virtual machines into production. And we can also feel much better about those as well. Confirming your server is properly set up prior to deploying any virtual machines into production can help keep your virtual server environment more secure.